My name is Leah Sheerin. I'm the Employer Liaison Officer here at NILGOSC, the pension scheme. With me today, I also have one of my colleagues, Rachel Clark. She's one of our technical officers at NILGOSC. Rachel is just helping me in the background, doing some magic and making sure that everything still looks okay, the slides are cycling through correctly, and also just making sure people stay on mute as well. So again, if you've just joined, because a couple of people are still coming in now, just keep yourself on mute if you can. Keep questions for the end. You can stick them in the chat if you want to. The only thing is I'm not monitoring the chat obviously while I'm doing the presentation, so the chat will be checked at the very end and after the seminar. So if you have anything in there, I'll probably come back to you after today's seminar has ended and everyone else has left. You can of course unmute yourself at the very end of the presentation whenever I invite you to, and I can answer any verbal questions hopefully that you have at that point. We are recording this session and it will then be posted on our website at a later date. For this reason, all cameras have been disabled for attendees. So you notice that your camera is not able to be turned on. It just means that we don't have to blur your face in the later recording whenever it is being posted to the website. And any questions that are asked verbally at the end will of course be cut from the final recording, so you don't have to worry about them featuring in that. And as I say, if you have any questions that you want to not ask verbally, but you want to put them in the chat, you can of course do that, and I'll come back to you probably at the end or after the seminar. Please ensure if you are leaving questions in the chat that you leave a contact email if you're not joining, especially with your work account. So if you've joined and it's saying unverified next to your name, it means that I'm not going to have any contact information for you to get back to you after the seminar if I need to check things to answer your query. Please note this seminar is only for employers who administer the local government pension scheme NI. So it's only for NILGOSC employers. So if you're not an employer who administers the NILGOSC pension scheme, this information will not apply to you today. Today we're talking about administrative duties for leavers, so what you as an employer are responsible for doing, what are your duties under the regulations of the pension scheme for anyone who leaves the scheme. Firstly, we're going to look at the content. So the content that we will be going through today includes things like opt-outs. So if an employee opts out or a member opts out of the pension scheme, what your duties are as an employer for that person. We'll look at if it's simply just they've ended their employment, so they leave your employment and then also, of course, leave the pension scheme if they've left scheme employment, what you need to do, what your duties are under that as well. We'll then thirdly look at retirement and the different types of retirement. We'll go through those and again, what your duties as an employer are for retirees. We'll then look at death in service. So what happens if a member leaves the pension scheme and they're in your employment and the reason for them leaving is because they've died or they've passed away. What are your duties there? We'll then look at the LGS 15 leavers form, which is filled in for most leavers, and we will have well, I say example there, I just have the sections that I go through on the slides. I can of course send people, I do have an example leavers form drawn up. I can send that to people after today's session if they would like. So if you'd like a sample filled in LGS 15 leavers form with just demo information, I can send that to you as well if you'd like. And then at the end, of course, there'll be some time for questions, as I say, where you can unmute your mic. Firstly then, looking at opting out. So what happens if a person opts out of the pension scheme, they're in your employment, and what are your duties as an employer for that? So a member can opt out of the pension scheme at any time. It's completely up to themselves. They just need to complete the LGS2 form, and that's their opt-out form. This opt-out form has to be acquired from NILGOSC, so really important to remember that you giving a member an opt-out form, an LGS2 form to opt out, even if they've asked you for one and you know where to find it on the website, you would be seen as inducing a member to opt out, and under the regulations you cannot do that. So really important to keep yourself right. If a member comes to you and says, I want to opt out of the pension scheme, can you provide me with an LGS2 form? Ask that member to go onto our website or to contact us and we can send it to them directly. Once a member does opt out, so you get that opt-out notice, you, the employer, stop deductions of their contributions once you receive that LGS2. And once that happens, you then submit what we call the SS2 form, which is a spreadsheet you fill in and you send that to NILGOSC within 1 month of the opt-out date that the employee, that the member has put on their LGS2 form. If you're an iConnect employer, an SS2 isn't needed anymore. So if you're using the iConnect system, you'll know yourself that you put any opt-out information on there. You will still need an LGS 15 in some circumstances, only if it's an opt-out and they have final salary membership. So if they joined the scheme before 1st of April 2015, you'll still need that LGS 15. For any non-iConnect employers, you're still filling in that SS2 form and you're still sending an LGS 15 whether they have final salary membership or not. When we look at membership length then, when a member opts out, this determines what the administrative duties are for that person. So really important to remember as an employer what happens when a member opts out, and it depends on the membership length. So if they opt out and they've been in the pension scheme for less than 3 months, what happens is the employer refunds the employee contributions that have been paid so far via your payroll, so your own payroll, and then you take a credit on your next remittance for your employer contributions as well. So you take that remittance, you take that credit on your next remittance to NILGOSC just to let us know and put a wee note in just saying you're taking a credit due to this person opting out. If the person opts out and they were in the scheme for more than 3 months but less than 2 years, an LGS 15 is required in this case if you're not on iConnect. NILGOSC refunds the employee directly, so important to remember the difference between those there. If they've been in the scheme for more than 3 months, less than 2 years, you can't refund that employee their contributions via your payroll system. It has to be NILGOSC who refunds them directly. They can also choose to transfer their benefits to another scheme before they're refunded their contributions. So if they want to investigate a transfer, then rather than taking the refund, which would effectively mean they have nothing left in the scheme, we have no liability to pay them a pension at the end of it, they can choose to transfer their benefits out instead rather than taking that refund. Please note as well, if they're in the scheme for more than 3 months, less than 2 years, there is no refund of employer contributions in that case, so you cannot take a credit for your employer contributions at that point. And lastly, if they're in the scheme for more than 2 years and they opt out, an LGS 15 is required. And what happens in that case is the person doesn't have an option to be refunded their contributions. Their option is to get deferred benefits or to transfer out of the scheme. And deferred benefits means that we basically close their pension account and we keep those benefits for them for whenever they choose to retire. And as I say, there's no refund applicable for whether it's employee contributions or employer contributions in that case. Looking at iConnect opt-out, so if you're an iConnect employer, you've probably used the opt-out system on iConnect before, whether you use the payroll extract system or the online return system. The way that works is for opt-outs with less than 3 months membership. This is specifically for online return iConnect employers, I should have said. You'll know from using the online return for iConnect that you get to a screen, which is your leavers screen towards the end of your submission. Any opt-outs at less than 3 months that you want to put through as an opt-out, you're using the opt-out tick box in the leavers screen and then inputting that date of leaving in the box that's provided as well. The difference then is if it's an opt-out with more than 3 months membership, you're not using that tick box, you're just using the drop-down menu for a reason for leaving to select opt-out as the reason for leaving and input date of leaving as well. So just a difference there for iConnect employers using the online return system. It just depends again on the membership length, what your duty is there for reporting it on iConnect.
That's it now.
Okay, and that's the opt-out tick box there you can see on the slide. And then here's the select reason for leaving there. So you would be, if it's an opt-out with less than 3 months membership, you're ticking the opt-out box and putting in the date of leaving. You're leaving that reason for leaving box blank. If it's an opt-out with more than 3 months membership, you are not using the tick box, you're not ticking opt-out, you are going and choosing opt-out as the reason for leaving from the drop-down menu and putting in the date of leaving as well. If you are an employer using iConnect, but you're using the payroll extract system, then I believe that is just done in the boxes that are provided in the spreadsheet for the payroll extract. So that was opt-out. So if a member opts out and leaves the scheme, what your duties are for that person. We'll now look at if an employee just ends their employment and effectively ends their pension, their membership of the pension scheme as well. So the employer submits an LGS 15 form within 20 working days of the date of leaving. And please make sure that you are on time with getting your LGS 15 form in, because there could be things that the employee is entitled to whenever they leave that we need to make sure that we have everything up to date and ready to go for them if they want to, for example, transfer out of the scheme. We need to have all of their benefit information up to date, all of their figures up to date to the date of leaving. Depending on the membership length, the member will be entitled to either a refund from NILGOSC or to deferred benefits. And then, so we'll take the LGS 15 form with all of their information on it. We'll check their file, their pension record on our system, and we'll see what their membership length is, and we'll determine then what their options are as a leaver from the scheme then. And of course, we'll contact that member going forward from there to let them know what their option is. And again, for iConnect employers, the LGS 15 is only needed for the end of employment if there is a final salary membership involved. So if they've just ended their employment with you and you're sending in that LGS 15, it's only if there's final salary membership involved. Looking again at the membership length, so if they have less than 2 years and they end their employment and leave the scheme, NILGOSC refunds the member directly, no refund of employer contributions. If it's more than 2 years and they end their employment and leave the scheme, the member can choose to either leave their benefits deferred with NILGOSC, so they become a deferred member, and even though we close their pension file, so they're not contributing to the scheme anymore because they've left, their file will still be looked at each year for that inflationary increase that we apply to people's benefits each year. So even though they're deferred and it's effectively frozen, they will still benefit from that inflationary increase to their benefits each year. So they can decide to defer to be a deferred member and defer their benefits until retirement, or they can choose to transfer their benefits to another scheme. So it's completely up to the member what they would like to do in that scenario. Going on then to look at retirement and some of the different types of retirement available to a member under the pension scheme. So the first one is voluntary retirement, and that includes anything from early retirement, so going before your normal minimum pension age, or normal pension age rather. There's normal retirement, which is going at your normal pension age, and then there's late retirement, which is where you work on and still contribute to the scheme past your normal pension age. Voluntary retirement is payable from age 55. Now, I've put an asterisk there. You've probably heard at this point a lot about the minimum normal pension age increasing to 57 from April 2028. So just to note that age 55 is only there for now, for another couple of years. From April 2028, that will be rising to 57. So members will not be able to have their benefits released to them from age 55 anymore. It'll be from age 57. So at the moment, payable from age 55 if they have 2 years qualifying membership. So they've been in the scheme for at least 2 years, or they've transferred in some kind of qualifying membership from a previous pension scheme into ours. The employer can choose to waive any early retirement reductions. So if a member retires early, of course, we, the scheme, pay out a pension to the member for the rest of their life, for as long as they live. And if that person is taking pension from age 55, they take all their benefits out, they're now getting annual pension from age 55, 56, 57, and we weren't expecting really to be paying that pension until their normal pension age of say 67, 68. That means that it's being paid quite early to that person, and it means that there's going to be a strain on the fund, so we then need to apply actuarial reductions to that person's annual pension. You, the employer, can choose to waive any of those reductions if you choose to. You can also switch on any Rule of 85 protections if the member is under age 60, so just be aware of the Rule of 85 protections as well and which members would fall under those protections. If a member is under the age of 60 and they have Rule of 85 protections, or they'd normally be entitled to those, if they're under 60 and they're taking their benefits out at that point, you, the employer, have a discretion whether or not to turn on the Rule of 85 protections to cover those and waive those reductions that are applied to them otherwise. The second type of retirement we'll look at is redundancy or business efficiency. And again, this is payable from age 55. Again, this will be going up to age 57 from April 2028 if 2 years of qualifying membership is held in the scheme again. There is no reduction to benefits for early payment of that person's benefits because the employer pays the cost to cover the strain on the fund, and that's just because of the nature of the redundancy or the business efficiency retirement. So just really important to note, in any case of redundancy or business efficiency retirement, you, the employer, will have a cost to cover that strain that's going to be on the fund for paying those benefits for releasing them early. The employer has a discretion on whether or not to award up to £8,823 of extra pension as well. You will hopefully have this in your discretions policy document. We will be doing training this coming Friday, actually, a seminar this coming Friday morning at 10 on the discretions policy document. So if you are interested in that and you want to make sure you're keeping yourself right with your discretions policy document, you can of course attend that and see me go through examples of a policy document. If a person is made redundant and they're younger than age 55, because of course redundancy, business efficiency, retirement is only payable from that age 55, their pension is not immediately payable to them, but they will be entitled to deferred benefits, or they're just kept, their benefits are kept in the scheme and they're payable then at that person's normal retirement age. Any additional pension that's paid by additional pension contributions or shared cost, additional pension contributions is paid at a reduced rate as well if the retirement occurs before their normal pension age. So even if that person is made redundant or they retire under business efficiency reasons, any additional pension that was paid via APCs or shared cost APCs would be reduced for early payment of the pension. Coming on then to look at ill health retirement as another retirement option under the scheme. If a person goes through ill health retirement, there's no minimum age requirement for ill health because it's just simply seen as it's a protection under the scheme. It's a very good protection that's offered by the NILGOSC pension scheme that we recognise that if a person is too ill to work and they qualify for ill health retirement, there's no minimum age requirement there at all. They do need 2 years membership in the scheme though, so it's still always that 2 years qualifying membership in the scheme needed. There is a 2-tier enhancement system that is assessed for ill health retirement. So the member, if they go through the ill health retirement process, will be assessed for ill health retirement, and our scheme, one of our scheme medical practitioners, they will assess them and see if they qualify for whether it's tier 1 or tier 2. And the difference with those is that tier 1, if they're assessed and they're found to meet the requirements for tier 1, they get an enhancement. So they receive all of their pension benefits that they've built up in the scheme up to the point where they have to retire due to ill health. And they also get an enhancement of 100% of the pension that they would have built up in the main section of the scheme up to the normal pension age. If they are examined for ill health and they are deemed to fall into the tier 2 category rather than tier 1, they still receive all of the pension benefits that they've built up in the scheme so far, but instead of the 100% enhancement on what they could have built up to normal retirement age, they get a 25% enhancement. So it's just a lesser enhancement. And that's because tier 2, they're considered likely to become capable at some point of undertaking gainful employment before they get to retirement age, their normal pension age, whereas with tier 1, they're considered unlikely to be able or capable of undertaking any gainful employment before their normal pension age. LGS 15s are required for all retirements, so really important to remember that whether it's redundancy, whether it's ill health, voluntary early, late, or normal retirement or flexible retirement, we do need LGS 15s for all of those, regardless of whether you are an employer using iConnect, regardless of whether that person has pre-1st of April 2015 membership or not. We'll then look at flexible retirement as well, which is a very popular option under the scheme as well for employees. Flexible retirement is also payable from age 55. Again, that's going to be rising to 57 from 2028. The member, when they flexibly retire, remains working in a reduced capacity, and they basically draw their benefits in whole or in part, and they continue working. They can choose to either stay in the scheme and keep building up contributions from their new sort of flexible retirement employment, or they can choose to opt out at that point and not contribute any more to the scheme. It does require employer consent. So for flexible retirement to happen, they need to come to you, the employer, and discuss with you their options, and you, the employer, have the say in whether or not you consent to that person flexibly retiring. You, the employer, can also choose to waive any reductions for the early claim of benefits that are to do with flexible retirement, or to switch on the rule of 85 if the member has those protections and they're flexibly retiring under the age of 60. Because with flexible retirement, they're still going to be releasing some benefits because they have to take something when they flexibly retire. They can't choose to retire flexibly and take no benefits. Those benefits are, of course, going to be paid early if it's from age 55 and it's before their normal pension age. So there will still be that cost, those actuarial reductions to their benefits, and you, the employer, as I say, can choose to waive those if you want to. Again, that should be covered in your discretions policy document. You should be able to apply that to all of your members who choose to flexibly retire. You then, whenever they flexibly retire, you enrol the member in the scheme for their new flexible retirement post, and then the pension build-up continues. As I say, that person can choose to opt out at that point and not build up any further pension in their flexible retirement post. A new pension record is created for that person. Whenever you tell us that they've flexibly retired, you send in the LGS 15 form, and then you re-enroll them in the scheme under their new post. We create a fresh new pension record for that post, and we send you a new NILGOSC reference as well to do with that record. Looking then at death in service, so the last kind of reason we'll look at today of why a member might leave the scheme if they actually pass away while they're in active employment. So the employer completes and submits an LGS 19 form, and that's within 5 days of the date of death. Now, of course, this might not always be possible, but really it's just as soon as you possibly can provide that LGS 19 form to let us know that that person has passed away, just because there are a lot of things on our end that we need to start doing administratively to make sure that death grants are paid, make sure that nominated beneficiaries are checked for the death grant, and so on. The employer needs to complete and submit the LGS 15 as well as the LGS 19, and again, that's as soon as possible. As soon as you possibly can get that in, it just makes things a lot easier for us and easier for that person's beneficiaries and potentially any family that's left as well. NILGOSC will process the forms, and then we issue an LGS 18 form to anyone who's entitled to a pension or a death grant. So the death grant is the one that members can choose to nominate anyone they wish for. So they can nominate children, husband, a charity, a friend, so on. Once we do the relevant checks, in the background, we then send an LGS 18 form to anyone that's going to be entitled to either a pension or to one of those death grants. But we, of course, can't send that until we've received the LGS 19 and the LGS 15 as well from you, the employer. Please note that NILGOSC cannot disclose details of nominated beneficiaries or the amounts that are due to them to employers, just in case anyone comes to you and asks you for that information and you in turn turn to us and ask us for that information. We can't disclose that to you, the employer, about any nominated beneficiaries or any amounts that they're due to be paid in the death benefits. I have this slide here which has a lot of information about all the different forms that are required for different types of leavers. I will be sending the slide deck to everyone that was present today via email address, so don't worry about having to take this down. It could be a useful slide to just maybe print out even and keep somewhere so that you know, okay, this event has occurred, this member has left due to this reason, this is the form that I'm required to send to NILGOSC, this is the time frame I'm required to send it in, and this is where I send it to. So it could be hopefully useful for you to keep somewhere. We're now going to come on to look at the LGS 15 leavers form. As I say, I'm going to go through the different sections of the LGS 15 leavers form just slide by slide. The hope being that, again, whenever you get this slide deck yourself after the session today, you can open up a blank LGS 15 leavers form and go through section by section and see, okay, this is what's needed in this section, this is what I need to remember to do in this section, and so on. So for iConnect employers, the LGS 15 is only needed for retirements, death in service, awards of additional pension, or for leavers with any final salary membership. Anyone who's not on iConnect yet, so any employers who haven't been on board the iConnect system yet and isn't using it yet, you'll still need to submit an LGS 15 for all of your leavers. Where an LGS 15 form is required, these must be submitted as per our pension administration strategy. So just remember what your duties as an employer are underneath that strategy. So that's within 20 working days from the date of leaving, the LGS 15 form needs to be sent in to us, or within 5 days of the date of death. And again, that makes sure that we keep to our time frames as well, and make sure that any benefits that are payable to anybody in the event of either the death of the member or the member simply leaving or retiring get paid in a timely fashion. The details that are provided on the LGS 15 form are really, really important, right from the personal information section at the start of it to all of the figures, the various figures and amounts that you need to put in and calculate for the LGS 15. This is because the LGS 15 forms are used to calculate and pay out any pension, any lump sum, any death grant that's due, or to calculate a deferred pension that's payable when a member reaches their retirement age. So it keeps us right as long as we can trust the information that you've sent us through on the LGS 15. So really important that the information provided is as accurate as possible. The more information provided, we usually say on the form, the less time will be taken potentially querying the information with you, which then of course equals a less delay to the payment of any benefits. So if you're ever unsure about an LGS 15 form, if you're ever unsure about will I actually understand why I'm sending this in or what this information is regarding, put a wee note on it, put a little asterisk in or type on it if you're using it electronically and send it in to us. Of course, you can always lift the phone, send an email to our admin department as well. They are very, very helpful up there. They see LGS 15 leavers forms every single day of the week, so they're very used to dealing with them. Please don't feel like you don't know, or it's okay for you to not know how to fill an LGS leavers form. there is our LGS 15 leavers form, there's always information available, whether it's on our website or via our admin department. So looking at the form then in the different sections, there are quite a few sections to fill in on the LGS 15 form. First section is the member details. This has to be completed fully. You can't leave anything here blank. The member details, really, really important, especially these details here. So the NILGOSC reference number, especially if the member is a multi-jobber. So we need to know what record specifically it applies to if a member has 3 different employments within you as an employer. We need to know they may only be leaving one of those. They may not be leaving their other two posts. So it's important for us to be able to tell which record this LGS 15 is applying to. Their address needs to be their most up-to-date address. If this differs from what we hold, we'll probably check back in with you just to see if this is a more up-to-date version of the address that we have on our file currently. The reason for leaving, this has to be clear for us to determine how to proceed, because of course we're going to look at the person's membership. So we're going to look at when did they join the scheme, when have they left the scheme, and what are the options available to that person now. So have a think about, is it just a resignation, or do they also intend to draw their benefits? So if they're leaving employment, okay, but are they also planning on retiring whenever they leave employment? So we need to know that as well. The date of leaving, that was for reason for leaving rather. The date of leaving then is the date that we calculate the benefits from. So we need to know the exact date that the member has left employment and the scheme, and then we'll use that date to actually calculate their benefits, and we'll base everything around that leaving date. We'll also need the details of the member's other employments within your authority, and again, that's just to make sure that we know which employments are continuing. We need to know which employments are ending as well. If this isn't filled in, we'll either phone or email you, and that just equals a delay for the member and for us in processing anything as well. A note for the address, for the home address, we'd hope that you would probably have, because you're paying the member, you would probably have the most up-to-date address. Think about where you would send a payslip to, and if you're sending a payslip to that address, that's the address really that we will need for sending any forms and paperwork to that member. Really important on the reason for leaving, just to add, to be clear on that one, because it saves time from us having to basically go back to you and clarify. So again, did they just resign and leave and they want to just leave their benefits in the scheme, or do they intend to actually draw their benefits after they leave? If you just say resignation and that person is expecting benefits to be paid to them, there will be a delay in the payment, because we'll begin to process, a deferral of that record. So we'll be thinking that person just wants to leave their benefits in the scheme. So if you haven't relayed the information to us that this member is leaving employment and they want to retire, they want to take their benefits out from NILGOSC, then we won't know to start processing things. Section 2 then on the LGS 15 form is any additional pension information. This has to be filled in if you are awarding any additional pension to the member. And there are different regulations in the LGPS-NI that you can award additional pension under. There's Regulation 18 or 32 of the LGPS Regulations NI 2014. You as an employer have a discretion under those 2 regulations of whether you choose to award up to £8,823 of additional pension. So just be aware that you have that discretion, you have the power to choose to do that as an employer. Again, that should be in your discretions policy document. You must have, that's one of the mandatory ones, to have a written policy on. So make sure you do, and make sure that it is being applied in a way that is fair to all of your members. Again, in your policy document, you'll cover that, and it'll tell you whether or not you're going to award. So firstly, will you ever award additional pension to members, and in what circumstances? So are you only going to do it on compassionate grounds, or are you only going to do it for particular circumstances? So just make sure that's very, very clear in your discretions document. Section 3 then, moving on, is protections under previous regulation. This section is where you specify any reduction in the hours or grade which has occurred due to a medical condition. So this will be really important if this person is ultimately going for ill health retirement. We need to know if anything has occurred in the last wee while of employment where they've reduced any of their hours or their grade, and it's been because of a medical condition. So medically reduced hours you'll hear about. So we need to know about this. Really important if the member, as I say, is leaving due to ill health, or if the member has died as well. So if it's been a death in service, we need to know this information too for that member. There's Section 3A, and Section 3A asks you, has the member been in part-time employment or working at a lower grade as a result of the condition which led to his or her ill health, retirement or death? And then if yes, so if you're ticking yes, under Regulation 39.7, no account will be taken of the reduced hours or grade when calculating the enhancement using APP. So that enhancement uses APP, and you need to make sure that, or we need to know, has this person, first of all, reduced their grade or their hours because of a medical condition, and we need to then know that no account of those reduced hours or grade will be taken into account whenever that enhancement using the APP is being calculated. There's Section 3B then. Section 3B asks you, has the member been downgraded in the last 10 years? And that's just simple tick yes or no, just again giving us a bit more information before we process that member's ill health entitlement, or if it's a death in service, any additional benefits and things like that. Section 4 then, moving on, Section 4 of the LGS 15 is the final pay section, and it specifies 2009 definition of final pay. This is the pay that we will be calculating the member's final salary benefits on, if applicable. So if that person doesn't have any final salary benefits, then we won't need that information. Really important, if that person does have final salary benefits, so anything built up pre-1st of April 2015, that this information is as accurate as possible, because we will be using this information to calculate their final salary benefits. Just a note that the basis of the calculation, you need to specify whether it's a monthly rate or a weekly rate, so it'll ask you to do that as well. You must be sure that it is the correct pay for the last 12 months of employment and not just up to the 31st of March. So it can be tempting to just put up to the 31st of March, but really important, and I think it does specify in the LGS 15 that it needs to be the last 12 months of employment. So make sure that you're providing us with the correct pay for that whole period. There's Section 4B, which is the final salary pay calculation table. So that's where you're actually putting in the final salary pay figures and the different rates. If there were various rates of pay in the last 12 months of employment, include all of them. Really important to do that, because if the rates of pay differ, then the calculation of the final salary benefits is going to differ as well. It's going to, we'll have to apply the different rates of pay to it at different increments. It should reflect the last 365 days prior to the date of leaving. And I've put an example there. If the member leaves on the 31st of October 2025, you should be providing pays and pay rates from the 1st of November 2024. So a full 365 days up to the date of leaving of pay. And again, if there are different pay rates that were being used in that time at all, just give all of those. It's quite a big table, so there are quite a few rows available for you. If you ever need to, I don't know if I've ever seen this before, but if you ever need more space than that table is allowing you, just staple another page to the back of your LGS 15 and our admin department can look at that too. There's Section 4B as well, continued. Provide any details of any absences, any bonuses or emoluments that were payable. There you'd have examples of things like honorariums, any first aid allowance and things like that. So just provide any details of those if they're applicable to that member. Please note as well, when it comes to the final pay, the best of the last 3 years is also applicable. So if the member has had their pay reduced in the last 3 years, then you can choose to, or they can ask you really as a member to use the best of their last 3 years' pay for the basis of their final salary calculation. Just Section 4 continued there, because it's quite a big section. References to pensionable pay in Section 4 are as per the 2009 scheme definition. So just to remember that there's the difference between how pensionable pay was defined under the 2009 scheme regulations and then going forward from the 2014 scheme regulations. The 2009 scheme definition of pensionable pay excluded things like non-contractual overtime and any additional hours. So really important to make sure that they're not included in any basis of final pay for final salary calculation. Anything built up after the 1st of April 2015, so any care pay to do with the care scheme, does include non-contractual overtime and additional hours. So just those two key differences there between the pensionable pay definitions. Section 4 isn't required if it's a post 1st of April 2015 joiner. So if the member only has care membership in the scheme, Section 4 isn't needed, because we don't need to know their final pay information, because there'll be no final salary calculation and final salary membership. Section 5 then, moving on, is just to do the care pay, so anything after the 1st of April 2015. You must provide the pensionable pay in the current financial year to the date of leaving, so from the 1st of April to the date of leaving. There's no need to provide previous years of care pay. The reason being is that we would assume or we would expect to have that on the member's record already, whether it's from your previous annual return, from the previous financial year, or via iConnect. So we should already know the previous year's care pays, and they shouldn't really be changing. It's just the current financial year up to the date of leaving. So 1st of April, the start of the financial year, up to the date of leaving, whether it's 31st of October or something like that. Provide the pensionable pay they've actually earned in the year under care definition of pensionable pay. So again, care definition of pensionable pay includes non-contractual overtime and additional hours, whereas the final salary definition pre 1st of April 2015 didn't include those two things. So just make sure that anything that is earned, that's actually earned in that year to the date of leaving, comes under the care definition of pensionable pay. Any non-contractual overtime or additional hours worked, they are deemed to be pensionable. Make sure they're accounted for in that pensionable pay figure. Any arrears or other payments paid in the current year should also be included. Do not include any payments if they relate to a period prior to 1st of April 2015. And again, that's just because we want to make sure that those two definitions of pensionable pay remain separate, because there are those two key differences to do with the non-contractual overtime and additional hours. Any APP should be included in the main or 50/50 section pay, and also detail the APP component separately in the column provided. So you'll note in that table for the care pay, it'll have the main care pensionable pay, and then it'll have 50/50 care pensionable pay, and it just depends whether the person was in the main section of the scheme or in the 50/50 section of the scheme. If they didn't have any 50/50 membership or 50/50 pay, just leave that column blank. Any APP does need to be included, so any APP that was any assumed pensionable pay that was being used in that year to the date of leaving needs to be accounted for in that full main care pay figure or 50/50 section pay figure, but also make sure you detail that just the APP component that was paid in the separate APP column that's provided as well. Section 6 then, again, is just looking specifically at APP, so this is just for assumed pensionable pay. So APP, if you're not aware, has replaced the concept of notional pay. So notional pay used to be used, now we use assumed pensionable pay. It's usually used when a member is on leave, whether it's due to sickness or injury, or on reduced or no pay, whether they're on child-related leave, or if they're absent on reserve forces leave as well. So if they're on leave and it's one of those protected leaves where APP is used to protect their pension build up in the scheme while they're on that protected leave, that's when APP is used. It is calculated as the average of the pensionable pay that the member received for the 3 months or 12 weeks before the pay period in which they commenced that reduced pay or leave period, or the death or ill health retirement, because that's where APP comes in as well. APP is used to help calculate those death benefits and also any ill health retirement enhancement as well. There will be a session tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. just on APP, on the calculation of assumed pensionable pay. So if you haven't signed up for that yet and it's something you're interested in, please do register for it and attend. Again, that's just tomorrow at 10 a.m. The APP figure, once it's calculated, is then grossed up to an annual figure, and the pro rata is applied for the period of time the member was on the reduced pay or leave. So again, I'll be going through the full calculation of APP using sample figures and a sample demo member tomorrow in tomorrow's session. For any term time or retainer staff, it is based on the notional weekly contractual rate of pay, so just slightly different in how it's worked out for any term time or retainer staff. And of course, as I say, APP, the whole point of using APP is that when a member's on leave or a protected type of leave, is that it protects a member's pension accrual. We notes on APP here just to remember, because sometimes APP can prove kind of difficult to work out and make sure that you're reporting the right figures correctly. Any overtime or additional hours worked, so have a think about those whenever you're calculating APP. Would you expect these to have been worked if the member had not been absent? So if that member hadn't been absent due to child-related leave, due to sickness or illness, and APP is being calculated, would you expect that person to have been working any overtime or additional hours if they hadn't been absent due to that protected type of leave? If yes, then you may consider factoring the pay for that into your APP calculation. Any lump sums as well, so would there be an expectation that a lump sum would have been paid on a regular basis? If so, include that. So it's anything that you think the member would regularly be entitled to or have as part of their pensionable pay if they hadn't been absent due to child-related leave, reserve forces or illness. Any hour changes as well, any hour changes that occurred can artificially result in a higher or lower APP figure. If there's any part of the APP calculation that results in a pay that's materially different than the pay they would normally have received, so whether it's higher or lower, you can instead use their notional pay, so you can still use the notional pay in that scenario. If you are using the notional pay, you have to consider the pay that's received over a 12-month period, including any overtime worked, any term time, or family-friendly working patterns, and so on. The APP figure should be increased by the revaluation when its use of APP passes the start of the second consecutive scheme year. So if APP is in use for 2 years, then once you pass the second 1st of April, so the second start of the financial year, then APP should be increased by a revaluation rate at that point. Moving on then with the form, we come on to Section 7. Section 7 of the LGS 15 form is pensionable pay or contributions in the year of leaving. So this is where you detail the pensionable pay, the contributions deducted from that pensionable pay in the financial year to the member's date of leaving. So that's 1st of April up to the date of leaving. You complete Section 7A if the member was in the main section of the scheme. You complete Section 7B if they were in the 50-50 section. Whichever of those two sections doesn't apply to that member, just leave it blank. You include here any AVCs as well that were paid, any APCs, so additional voluntary contributions or additional pension contributions, both member and employer if it's a shared cost APC that's being paid as well. So just make sure if it's shared cost APC, so you, the employer, are paying towards that APC contract, make sure you're detailing your shared cost contributions in there as well. If there's any difference between the pensionable pay in this section and in Section 5, so the previous one of the previous sections, please provide a reason for this. And again, you can provide a reason in the box that's given, or you can write it in underneath the section if you need to provide a longer reason. Again, as I said at the start there, as much information as you can provide on the LGS 15 form is going to help us hopefully avoid having to go back to you and delay the payment of benefits or any benefits that are payable. Looking at Section 8 then of the LGS 15 form, this is again pensionable pay and contributions, but it's in the previous year. This only needs to be completed if your annual return has not been submitted to NILGOSC for the previous financial year, or you haven't submitted the figures via your iConnect return for the previous financial year. So not all employers will have to fill in Section 8. If you are filling it in, only include pay and contributions figures from the previous financial year in this section. So make sure that you're not including anything from the current financial year. That goes in Section 7 that we've just gone through there. Okay. At the very, very end of the LGS 15, you're just signing off. So you're putting in your employer name, your signature, and so on. Please remember to complete this last section. We can't accept the LGS 15 unless we have the employer name and the signature as well, because we need to know it's been signed off by you, the employer. So name of the person who completed the form and their signature, and then a contact name for any queries. That can be the same as whoever completed it, or it can be different. So you could be completing the form, but you have a colleague who is more ready to answer any queries to do with it, and in that case you can put their contact name for that instead. Also a telephone number to contact in case we want to contact you by phone, the date that you've completed the LGS 15 form, and then an email address for any queries. Usually if we have a query in the LGS 15 and any information provided on it, we will email you and it will be whatever email address is there for queries. If we can't get through to you by email, or we've sent quite a few emails, that's when we'll start to lift the phone probably. The form cannot be accepted, as I say, without this information, especially that signature as well and the contact information, so make sure that that is provided. And I think I've just repeated that slide there again, just to make it clear to you that I have that on a slide, just so you can use that for reference yourself at later dates whenever you are processing leavers. So just a good reminder of the forms that are required for the different events, the time frames attached to those forms. So make sure that you're keeping within those time frames, because they're all different for the different forms, and then where to send them to as well, because we do have dedicated email inboxes for the likes of LGS 15s, LGS 16s, and so on. Other employer duties, I just have this kind of slide at the end of each of these employer sessions that I'm having this week and last week. General duties as an employer to be aware of that you need to do on an ongoing basis. LGS 40 form, that is to advise us of any employer contact details that have changed. So that's anything from a change to the chief executive, contact details. If you're a school, that could be the principal. any change to the salaries or payroll contact details, any change to personnel or HR contact details, any change to pension contact details, equality, or the authorised signatories as well. Really important to make sure the authorised signatories are up to date as possible, so we can make sure if an employer has left, so if somebody has left your employment and they used to sign off LGS 15 forms, LGS 16 forms, we need to know that they are no longer a signatory, an authorised signatory who can send in and sign off forms. Completion of your annual return. If you're not an IConnect employer, you'll still be doing your annual return, and that's due around, well, it's done up to March of each year. The annual return team in our admin team upstairs always sends you your pre-populated spreadsheet for your annual return, and will let you know about the deadline for that as well. Upkeep of your discretions policy. Again, really important to remember to keep that as up to date as possible. Once you have updated anything in your discretions policy document, you are required under the regulations to send us a copy of that so we have it on file. If you want, I can either just file it away for you, or I can look through it for you if you have any specific questions on your discretions policy. So I'll do that, and also our legal team will take a look through it to make sure that everything looks okay. Of course, it's your own policy and it's your discretions to use however you see fit, but we can at least look through it for you and just say, have you considered this discretion as well? Have you considered when you'd use this discretion in this circumstance, and so on. So just make sure you keep that as up to date as possible. Send it to us if anything changes on it. And then just, I always mention as well, an annual request of pay and pension information. So that's those pay and pension disclosure requests. So if there are any of those that need to be provided, that's another employer duty that you need to fulfill as well. Lastly, again, as I always do at the end of these seminars, just pointing out the resources that are available to you, the employer, on our website. Lots of information available there. We have all of our guides. There are just a few of the guides we have available there. The employer's guide to the 2015 scheme is really a really good overview for employers. If you want to get a lot more detailed into the payroll duties for payroll departments, there's our payroll guide there. There is also the guidance for employers on your employer discretions. That will be, I'll be going through that document in Friday's seminar this week, which is just on employer discretions policy. There's also the brief guide to automatic enrolment there for employers. I've also just put a snapshot in there of a couple of our forms. So the LGS 6 remittance form that you send into our finance department every month, the LGS 25 amendment details form for any changes that occur for a member, and the LGS 34 form I've also just put there as well. So just a reminder that our website contains lots and lots of information and resources for employers. But of course, if at any point you can't find what you need on the website, you can, of course, email us. You can use our general email address, which is info@nilgosc.org.uk, or you can use my seminars email address, which is seminars@nilgosc.org.uk, and that comes through to me. There's our telephone number as well available there, and you'll be put through from the front desk through to, say, our admin 1 team or our calculations team, depending on what your query is regarding. If it's to speak to me, they'll pop you through to me as well if I'm available. If you do ever want to visit us in your capacity as an employer in person, that's our address there, Templeton House on Hollywood Road in East Belfast. If you do want to visit us, please do let me know, or let someone in NILGOSC know, so we can make sure we have things in place. We have a room booked, and we have the right members of staff available to speak to you about whatever it is you want to speak about. Please do just tell us if you're interested in a visit in person. And of course, if you're ever interested in a seminar, so if there's a seminar, an approaching retirement seminar you think would be really handy for your members, a seminar specifically for like new joiners, if you had a lot of new joiners in the last couple of months, please just email me on that seminars@nilgosc.org.uk email address, and I can look into either coming out to you for a seminar or providing, like this, a remote seminar via Microsoft Teams as well. Perfect. Well, those of you who are left, thank you very much again for attending. I'm going to end the event now.